right. So basically, with the market at the minute, we've had a few days of overlapping value. Let's just get the TPO again. So pretty much we've got like we've got this range here, right? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days, right? 8 days of value, and then this doesn't count since like even though like the value is kind of in that, it's kind of like a big rangy day, I'd say. And like just looking at like the blocks, right? We've literally just tapped in, and then majority of the volume is in like the outside of this kind of value, so this doesn't count. Yes, it is obviously doesn't count because there's also another range day. But pretty much what happened yesterday was, we got moved down, we got the SFP here, left some pullers there, and pretty much like, we just formed like, a double distribution here, with some like, imbalance here. I think the imbalance, like it's pretty much just trading inside the imbalance, but again, like this isn't what you want to see usually from these imbalances. If I just draw this correctly, I don't know how to draw apparently. But pretty much usually from these imbalances, right, you want to see like a smooth move in, and then like a pretty rapid move out, right? But once you start slow grinding and like kind of doing this inside of like the 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 single print, right, or like the imbalance, that's bad, right? And we left some poor lows there. This is also a range val. So I was kind of thinking here was, we've got double distribution here. If we end up like um, accepting lower, then we've got 79.6 area here, like specifically MPOC here as support. And if this ends up holding a support, then like, maybe you can scalp along towards 80k, right? But then again, if you get the rejection from here, then you should go lower. The textbook at the minute has just been like, shorting breakouts or like, fake outs of value. Yesterday, I wasn't really I wasn't on the charts long enough to see like the move back up to 82k, but that was a nice move to the MPOC there, right? And we've got one here, so it's literally just ping pong, right? So like I said, the last few days of price action, if you just expand the blocks, we've seen how for example here we get this like and we shorted this in the server as well. We get this like SFP of previous daily value area high, and then we end up dumping, right? But then as you end up dumping lower, you take out the high volume nodes from prior profiles, right? But then as soon as like you start to get reacceptance there, and like you get rejection here. That's like your your longs and shorts, right? Same kind of thing here. Like we're range bound until proven otherwise. But it's only like when we get like a shift in market conditions where we just dump like that, get our like rejection, or like get like a lower high here, then I'd aim for like a sweep of all these lows. And then from there, I'd aim for 77k. So I mean, the bias hasn't changed at all. It's just that we've kind of just been ranging all week. But again, like eventually this range should break out, and like whichever direction this ends up breaking out, we should get like, a decent follow through, because once you have this many consecutive candles, you tend to get like an explosive reaction. I think like this is a good example here, where like you've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 6 days of price action here. You get your move lower. I guess it's like like a 5k move lower, and then of course like once you start reclaiming value, you start trending upward. I think with this, the only way that I see this kind of going back up to the highs, right, would be again like if we get that move down, reclaim value, and then back up again. Because again, like these highs are pretty garbage. With the session profiles, because again, the session profiles are pretty nice because you can like you can kind of just get like a faster idea of like where value is. So if I just draw value, I think it's like 81.7 area, and then about 80,200. Yeah, I mean you can literally just see like how clean this is, right? At the minute with this kind of profile as well, like I mean this just started, but like the London session's been kind of dog shit. This is usually kind of distributive, so we should see like some sort of expansion in New York. Again, like these pullers here are a magnet, the MPSC here is a magnet, so like it's literally just the same idea of you know SFP. I don't know if I would take this kind of position though, because again, like I don't like these kind of like shallow moves when value is so small, right? But again, like this is an easy draw value. That's a nice MPOC there. If it goes low like that, like I said, then GG. If not, all these lows get wiped out. Let me see if you guys got any questions. Finn, I think he's just been kind of busy with like some IRL projects. But I think I'll message him today, but I think he should be back next couple of weeks. And then looking at the Solana, I think you're at Solana. Okay, so just looking at this, right? So this is your Bitcoin chart. Basically, with this, what I was kind of thinking was that, you know, we've got your yearly value. Again, this hasn't changed. My bias hasn't changed. You've got yearly value there. You have, you know, your prior range here. And pretty much with this, like, again, like with that high like that, I think, like, you know, sooner or later we are going to take the high there. But the only issue here is that, you know, if we are, you know, losing value and whatnot, then, you know, 77k is a good level, which coincides with, like, you know, your daily gap there, right? But again, you've also got your monthly value, which has been pretty good so far. Let me just show you that. So again, you've got your range. So basically, like I was saying, like, you know, the low SFP, right? You got the order block there and whatnot, and again, like this would just be like, you know, a higher low, and like of course, like by that point, like, you know, if you are getting those like kind of higher lows and you are getting like, you know, a flush in delta, then this is like, you know, we're going to go higher, because I think for me, still, it's like as long as we don't lose monthly value, which is like, you know, 79k, I still think like, you know, we're going to end up tagging 84k. 86k, which is like, you know, previous range value, and also the anchored VWAP from all-time high, right? But again, like for lower downside targets, you've got like monthly value as well, because again, if I just draw that out, you've kind of just got like, you know, this kind of empty space where there's no real value. So if price does go below her, it should be like, you know, a fast move like down, like a fast flush. And in terms of quarterly value as well, again, the thing with quarterly value here as well is that, you know, we've had this kind of deviation here into developing quarter. I think this is developing monthly at that point. I think developing quarterly is good kind of like, you know, in the middle of the second month. So about right about now. So again, like a move here again to 79k, like into that order block there, would be a pretty nice kind of SFP, or like deviation, like rejection of quarterly value. But if not, again, you've got like this MT kind of going quarterly value. So the previous monthly value area high would be a really good target. And I think, like, you know, with the interactions we've had with monthly value, you can kind of see how it's always kind of been like, you know, a good support in terms of just the trend. So that's something to really look out for. I think the anchored VWAP from here as well kind of coincides with like 76k, but I don't think we'll go that low. But yeah, it's still just like, you know, rotational until proven otherwise. Wait, guys, any questions so far? Just talk in chat. No questions. Okay. All right. So pretty much some of the things I was kind of looking at was, as you know, like, you know, I'm mostly out of my SU position at the minute, but again, like, you know, with altcoins, I'm not too interested in altcoins right now, unless, like, you know, we get like a big flush in them. So, like, you know, for example, with Sui and a lot of other altcoins that broke out, you know, they broke out like, you know, multi-month consolidations, right? And in these multi-month consolidations, you've got like, you know, some really good established value, right? So, like, you know, if these coins come back to value and then they retest, then, like, you know, they're good bids. But other than that, I don't really care. Hyperliquid is very good. This one's always going to be good. You've always got like, you know, a good bullish bias for this, right? So pretty much with this, you're retracing back into this old value here, right? And with this old value, you know, the value area high is about like, you know, 48. So, I mean, right now you can kind of see how we just SFP'd the high here so far. And like, you know, if Bitcoin does flush and like, you know, Hyperliquid comes down, I'd look for this to come back into that big imbalance there. And then, you know, if we get like some sort of support there, or like, you know, if it goes deeper here, then that's not good. But if it gets sort of support here in that imbalance, then, you know, you can get continuation play higher into that 48 area. Ethereum, I mean, looking at Ethereum right now, I mean, you've just got like, you know, a chain of lower highs and whatnot, so this kind of looks like a slow grind down. This should just flush and take out all these lows here. If I look at monthly value again, like this lower empty bracket just means that it's going to end up expanding a lot faster. It's pretty much like if you lose this low here, there's just no support whatsoever, and then you've got like a good SFP level into the monthly val here. But yeah, I mean with Bitcoin, I'm not really too bullish on it because like purely this range can break out of kind of anywhere, right? So again, like I said, reclaim like that and then higher. Otherwise, if you get this and then yeah, that's your short. Stacks. Dude, I don't really do stock. Let me see. Okay, so alright, what the fuck are European stocks for? Shit. The DAX. What time frame do you want me to look at? The next few weeks. Okay. I'd say this low here is a drawn liquidity. Mainly just because like, you know, you have this big rejection, prices come back down, it's basically back inside this kind of range, right? You got this acceptance into monthly value as well. I think this should just come back down again to the low here. Just 4 hour. Yeah, it should come back into the low here. You've just got like, you know, low liquidity runs here and here. You could get a scenario where, you know, 1 second. Something that I always see with this, right, is that once you have like, you know, a low here, which is pretty good low, because this low ended up, you know, causing this big spike uptrend. You might get like a bait of this into this kind of order block here, and then like, you know, you get a higher low here, and then, you know, you get your rotation back up to take out these imbalances, right? So take out these equal highs into the imbalances here. Kind of like, you know, a retest of this kind of high here, right? And then pretty much like, you know, if you do see follow through here, then like, you know, you go higher. If not, then like, you know, we're just gonna get more rotational kind of bullshit here. I think unless like, you know, you start losing this low here, then DAX should just like, you know, be rotational. I mean, that is pretty nice, you know. You've got like pretty much you've got pretty much like an empty space here. So again, like that's gonna be pretty important here. Like 23,750. This has been recorded as well, so you can rewatch lots of the stream afterwards. Also, when I say like, you know, we're gonna flip a level, all that kind of stuff, right? What I'm trying to say here, and again, like this is like something that happened to me yesterday. Because like, you know, yesterday I was kind of thinking when Bitcoin was at, you know, this level here, I was kind of thinking like, you know, am I going to short? Am I going to go long? And this is like, you know, the whole acceptance thing, and I talk about it in the Notion and whatnot, and pretty much what happened there was, you know, yesterday this was a little bit frustrating because I got front ran, and then after I got front ran, I kind of just decided to enter SUI, which went up a little bit, but then it just ended dumping immediately. So basically like here, right, so that's your value area, about 23, yeah, about right there, right? So pretty much like, you know, you've got an aggressive move into the value, right? So pretty much you sweep the initial high there, you make a high low, then, you know, you get your open interest spike, delta spike, right? Then pretty much like, you know, when price kind of goes sideways here, you kind of either wait for like, you know, a breakout or like, you know, a breakdown, right? So like you kind of see like, you know, these kind of imbalances, price starts like, you know, just trending a little bit low, right? You get a small move down, but in that small move down, you can kind of see how you got like big shorts opening, and like, you know, you got a huge delta spike there, right? So that's pretty bullish because you've got like a bullish divergence. But then the question here is like, you know, when you go into value, are you going to accept or not? Once you start entering value, right, you can either enter value with just a shitload of orders, like straight off the bat, where you just break up higher with imbalances, right, and single prints, right, or alternatively, you can just chop a value, right, and eventually kind of just break up. It's kind of like the same as this, right? Pretty much like as you entered value, I was thinking like, you know, there's a lot of shorts opening here, and you know that it's fresh shorts because like OI is kind of creeping up a little bit, right? And I think you can actually check the OI thing here. Yeah, there's a lot of fresh OI that's coming up. It's pretty much like these are like, you know, fresh shorts that are opening, and they'll get squeezed, you know, if price trends higher. And as soon as price broke higher here, I was kind of like, you know, where to put my stop loss. I kind of like just fumbled around and I missed out on the positioning, right? But pretty much like if you start seeing like a lot of like, let's say for example you're looking for acceptance right above continuation higher, if you start seeing like, you know, a bunch of shorts opening at that position and OI creeping up, right? As long as like, you know, price can break above, then like that's very good for you because they get squeezed higher, right? Because I think the two POIs yesterday would have been I believe it was 80.2, 81, and then, you know, 81.8, right? And like just looking at the levels, you know, 81k flat is right there. You can kind of see like, you know, once you start tapping the MPOC there again, like you've got a big spike in open interest. You kind of see like, you know, delta kind of flattens off, right? Pretty much here it's just short accumulation. And like, you know, with the range, again, it can break down either way. So the main way that you kind of execute that would be like, you know, if we break below where the aggressive shorts are positioned, which is like, you know, around here, then like, you know, if you break above it, right, then like, you know, these guys going to get squeezed again, same thing here, right? And like, you know, if the aggressive buyers here get pushed below, so like, you know, if this just starts dumping like that, then like this is where you kind of execute, because again, like all theyese guys are underwater, they'll close their positions, and like, you know, you go lower, right? And like you kind of see like, you know, this plays out multiple times, and then at that 81.7 area again around here, this is like the same kind of thing where you get aggressive buyers that open, but again, like these buyers, like it kind of annoys me because I wasn't at my desk at the time, but like, you know, how OI is kind of stable, delta's decreasing. So like the net positioning, right, is that you've got more and more shorts entering the market, right? So that's why delta's dropping, and you've got like a lot of big shorts are also opening. And like, you know, these aggressive buyers here, and you know they're aggressive because they're opening big trade sizes. Once like, you know, you kind of map out where most of your aggressive buys are, right? Let's say from about, because we sweep the high here, right? And then that's kind of like your breakout level. Once you start seeing like, you know, the aggressive buyers here lose their positions, that's when you kind of say to yourself like, you know, like price is pretty fucked, right? Like the buy's pretty fucked, and like this is the way you kind of execute, where you get a retest of like, you know, the huge buyer region. And if you're asking like where to highlight, you can just start off at like, you know, where you break the level, and you have to break it pretty aggressively to show you where those buyers are. And like, you know, as soon as like, you know, you retest their position, you can just see how like, you know, big shorts open there, and then price kind of trends lower, and eventually you get a retest here again. And this is kind of like what makes it so difficult. But if you just put like, you know, your entry around here, and your stop would probably be like, you know, at the high either here or here. Again, like this high here is pretty good, but like that's pretty close to my liking. I like this one here though, because again, like it's clean rejection, whereas like this one you kind of have a multiple of that. So it's kind of like up to you. I think you can go for like, you know, a higher R entry setup as well, where you just put your invalidation here as well. But again, like you kind of see how like this area here where you've got the aggressive buyers, right? You can see how it gets retested a couple times, and that final retest there, you can kind of just see how again like with the delta spike there, you can kind of see how delta was pretty high, but then by the end of that, it kind of closed significantly lower. And when you look at like the delta min max, right there, so the delta finished at like minus 3 million, but at highest delta was like 10 million. So what you got like 12 million trap delta, nearly 30 million. And then like you get your dump low. I think right now the current value here, again like right now we're kind of just seeing a lot of absorption here, right? But again, like I don't like these kind of lows because like for me a good low, and I talked about this on Twitter as well, where you get early participation and whatnot, and like the whole early participation thing as well is that before forming a bottom that has excess, right? And what I mean by excess is you want a lot of orders, you want a lot of shorts that are trapped there, or like a lot of short delta, and then like I can like move like that, and then an SFP here, and then move higher, right? Because if you get like a lot of buyers that kind of just enter at the low, even if you do have an insane amount of trap delta, those buyers kind of get revisited a number of times, right? And like these kind of lows tend to just break. And again, like if you're making like another move up, and then like you're seeing a lot of buyers entering here, but they can't push price higher, then you're just gonna go lower, and it's kind of like the same thing where those trap guys just capitulate and go lower. Looking at these lows here, I think it's like 80, 230, something like that, right? Again, like this is a two-way auction. Like this low is gonna get swept. It's pretty dog shit. But again, like this is just this. As long as we don't flip the high, I believe. It's that previous daily view up, yeah. As long as we don't like flip 81k, right? I think we're just gonna end up taking out that low again. And let me just check what other lows we had. Because again, like with these order blocks as well on the footprint, you can kind of check what they look like as well. So if I just 79.5, 80k. I'd have to redo that chart. Can't be bothered. 80. So again, like with that order block that I showed you, you've got like a buyer-led imbalance here, right? But again, like this is all empty single prints, so basically price should respect that order block. So again, like for me, 79.7 is a really good long setup. But like again, like if it doesn't flip 80.2, then it's cooked. If it does flip 80.2, then we're fine. But yeah, guys, that's it for Bitcoin. Anything else? If not, then I'm done. I don't think I'm looking at many other things in the market. I think I was looking at Zcash as well. This is mainly just for longs. Sorry, mainly for shorts, right? If we do get the opportunity, because like this is already breaking down, right? Like this. This has been like a pretty nice move up, right? I'm kind of just thinking, we end up getting a move downward into this imbalance here, and then we might get a mean reversion from there, right? But then if we, I think this is like just predicated if Bitcoin fails to hold 77, right? If this fails to hold 77 Bitcoin, right, this is just go all the way back down, take all these lows. But for now, I'm kind of just thinking, if I can get a short, I'd look for like a tap into the order block there, right? And just looking at that, bro, this is disgusting. It's either going to be like a tap of that or thin move down to that order block, and then move back up into like the range, right? Like just map out the range real quick. Yeah, move back up to the range here. Or like you just get like this, and then it's cooked, right? But again, like with this, like with the range values, you can always kind of like have to be dynamic there, because it can always reaccept and reject, right? So for me, like either move down to like the lower 500s, or like it just sweeps that low out, takes the imbalance, and then like comes back up again. Here would be a fantastic short all the way down. But if you end up like seeing a pretty nice low form here, like a nice wick, then higher. NQ, bro. I don't do stocks. I don't even have. Bro, I don't even know what to say about NQ, bro. Like this is just all-time high, bro. Like I don't know what I can say about NQ. You know, it's just it's literally just all-time high every other session, right? You got like shit highs up there. Should take out those poor highs. I don't know, probably like another all-time high. If it doesn't take out all-time high and you start to see it kind of break down here, then this low is pretty good for an SFP, like an SFP of that wick. 5 minute. Yeah, I mean that low wick there on 30 minute looked pretty nice, right? Like an SFP of that wick because it lines up a weekly value area high. So like I don't know, I look for a move down toward like I don't know 29,600 or something, and then it should just print out another all-time high. If it ends up like just giving you a shit kind of dead cat bounce, then you'd start seeing it unravel, right? Because this is just empty value, and like these lows are pretty dog shit. But like that wick there, that wick should hold. Can you explain how? Okay, so I mean I kind of explain it in the Notion as well, but sure. Basically, okay, so pretty much right with lows and highs, right? When you're forming a low and a high, you kind of want to see either, like I think in ICT or SMCs and whatnot, they call it like a Quasimodo, right? Where you kind of just have that where you trap a lot of people here, and then like you just squeeze them immediately higher and you move back up again, right? The second alternative, right, is I move that like that, back up, and then like a retest of that low, and then back higher, right? The first one here, you've got trapped by you have like trapped people down here, right? And then they get immediately squeezed, and then buyers start to like hot step in here, and then like you get above your reference point, right? And then higher, right? Here you have trapped people here, right? But then you have like buyers who kind of enter the market pretty early, or you just don't have like a huge amount of people who are trapped here, so then you kind of retest a low and then move back up, right? And then on the second one here, you trap some more people, and you also like once buyers start to see like a protected low form, it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy where we just start to trend higher, right? But then the issue here is that when you do have people who like you don't have like a low that has excess in, right? Because excess just means you have excess orders or like excess volume, right? Where you just have too many people who are, for example, short in that position with price not moving, right? Eventually, when price doesn't like move in the direction of trend, it starts to move higher. These people just close their positions, right? When you get like a low that doesn't have too many people who are trapped, and you get buyers who kind of enter the market pretty like quickly, right? What happens here is that the move upward, right? Because in this scenario, the move upward is buyers plus short squeeze, right? The move upward here is purely just people who are buying, so it's a test of conviction, right? So if these buyers can't keep price going higher, then like this low is going to end up going down, and that's what happens a lot of the time. And then at the high here, or like whatever high forms there, you're just usually mitigating some sort of imbalance, or you're making a lower high with like pretty dog shit delta divergences, right? And if these buyers can't push price higher, right, then you kind of just take out this low, because this low is pretty like garbage. Like this low is basically a free low. And then looking at the just looking based on like the delta here, right? Again, like as you're approaching the low here, you do have like delta divergences, but again, like there's no bullish divergence in delta. Like delta is pretty congruent. Like you've got no reason to say like we're starting to be bullish here, because you just don't have any offside participants, right? And like even just looking at these lows here, you just see how like for example here the OI is pretty negative. So like this was a move down that was like from longs closing, etc. Right here, OI goes up, but then like delta is pretty negative as well still. In fact, I think delta is slightly more negative. So here you just have more and more shorts that kind of were placed here. But again, like there's no real delta divergences here just yet. So I think like this will either continue ranging, right? And if it does break higher, if it does SFP that 81 area, then we are going to take out that low. But at the minute, like there's not much to say. I just think like we're going to end up taking out that low first. I think a good example of a low would have been, if I just show you a good example of a low on Bitcoin. I think I was seeing it here yesterday or Wednesday. Here we go. So pretty much here, right? On Wednesday, you know, we had this low kind of formed, right? And pretty much once you get that kind of early buy participation there, where of course, like here, you start to see like, you know, your bullish divergence in delta, where your delta starting to kind of level out a bit, and like, you know, like you don't really have much trap delta here either, because it's like what, like 34 million delta at the end, and then at the lowest it's minus 34 million. So basically, you got no trap delta here. But again, like you get early buy participation, the buyers kind of push price higher, they push it into like, you know, this kind of aggressive sell region, and then once you go lower again, you stab into that low, and then you see how OI kind of spikes on that low, and delta spikes as well. You've made a lower low, right? But again, like delta's made a higher high, and you have like one single order of like, you know, 19 million. So pretty much like this is like fresh short start opening, and then price trends higher. But as price trends higher, these guys get squeezed. But then again, you get kind of early buy participation here, and it's kind of like a mixed bag where, like, you know, they're not really pushing price too aggressively either, because again, it kind of just fades, right? And then you get the retest here. But on the retest, it retests where these buyers kind of stepped in earlier, right? And then on that retest here, you can kind of see how, like, with that low here compared to here, where you're moving down, you see the big kind of divergence in delta between this and like the lows that kind of form here. In fact, like the actual low itself here is bullish. And then again, like once you pump out again, because again, like this isn't like, you know, organic buying either. It's kind of just like, you know, a short squeeze, right? Like aggressive buying and then followed by a short squeeze, but then there's no follow through in aggressive buyers, right? So again, you retest the low again. So I think like with this, the main thing I'm trying to say is that once we're trying to see in low formations is like this, for example, right? Where, you know, you do get trap delta, and then like, you know, you get some kind of aggressive buy participation, because like either you'll get a move that kind of goes away and doesn't come back, but at least you'll have some sort of like, you know, reference point of like, you know, where people are in the market. So like if price comes again, you'll retest it. Whereas like, you know, for example, like I think I had some good examples written down somewhere, but I don't have it at hand. I think early in the week, I think it was Monday. It must have been either Monday or I think it was on Twitter. But it's not something I can bring at hand, but it's something that, like, you know, you kind of just spot like once it happens. But yeah. Guys, anything else? Because that's the really good utility that I see with the footprint, right? Where it makes it easier to enter your position and to just manage your position as well. Especially like, you know, with the OI and delta, it kind of helps you just sift through like, you know, what is actually happening with the market right now. Okay, easy. I think on the daily, for example, you can kind of see how, like, you know, wicks behave with these wicks, right? Where it kind of happens a few times, because the wicks are a good example of like, you know, track participants, because all the wick tells you is that, you know, you've got like, you know, the open high close of the candle, right? Then you get like this big spike lower, and like in the spike lower, who do you think's trapped it? It's always shorts that are usually trapped down there. It's like you can kind of see how like here, right? The delta is a little bit more positive than like, you know, up there on these lows here. So basically, like, you know, despite price going down, delta's positive. So all these kind of like guys who are trapped there and whatnot, once you form like, you know, those kind of wicks, price tends to move away from them, and then like, you know, they kind of act as like, you know, a magnet, right? And it's the same thing I'm kind of saying right now, where with this low here, because you don't really have too many people who are trapped. We should just sweep it again until we actually start trapping people. But again, like the alternative is like, you know, because like with this kind of like, you know, price action right now, we're seeing a lot of aggressive shorts here as well. So like, you know, if price ends up flipping, if price actually starts flipping above where like, you know, these shorts are, right, then this just becomes like, you know, a POI to look at later on. But like, you know, for now, for me, until like, you know, we start cleaning above these shorts, I still think this is our main draw on liquidity. Like, you know, looking at the session profiles as well, like you've got back-to-back pull lows, which kind of coincides with this, because you know, like with pull lows, right? It's literally just on the TPO where, you know, you have like an unfinished auction there. So pretty much like, you know, market hasn't finished distributing at that level. And like when you look at the footprint, right, you can kind of just see how, you know, we just have a bunch of orders that have just sat there that haven't been picked up yet. So like, it's like whenever people say pull highs and pull lows, this is what they look like in order flow. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna close the stream.